Have you ever been somewhere and suddenly an alarm goes off? Maybe it was a smoke alarm or a tornado siren, and suddenly your body is on high alert, wondering if you're in any real danger. And right before you're about to take action, someone lets you know that it was a false alarm. And even though our bodies know that the threat is over, the adrenaline is still pumping through our veins. Our brains can often mimic these false alarms that we experience in our physical world. In this video, we'll take a closer look at false alarms. We'll look at how feelings are real but not always true. We'll look at how feelings can't always be trusted. And we'll learn how we should question our emotions. So stick around to the end of the video. Deborah's near-death experience. In chapter 20 of her book Reset, Deborah Fileta opens with a story about an unexpected and traumatic miscarriage that led to her losing a great deal of blood. She lost so much blood that the doctors performed an emergency surgery to save her life. Understanding emotions as signals. In the last video, we discussed briefly the topic of understanding emotions as signals. In this video, I would like to talk about that again a little bit in more detail so we can better understand the topic. First off, you might recall that we discussed the sympathetic nervous system. It is best known for its stress response or the fight or flight response. It's also important to understand the role of the amygdala. It's the emotional response center in our brain. It stores and retrieves emotional memories. It categorizes our experiences as either dangerous or ordinary. And it's important to understand that the amygdala can misidentify present emotions as threats from our past. False alarms. We can experience something today that our amygdala identifies as a threat. Trauma can cause the amygdala to trigger false alarms. In her book, Deborah talks about her panic attacks that happened a few years after her traumatic miscarriage. She says that we need to look for evidence that helps us differentiate real versus false alarms. Deborah says that just because you hear an alarm doesn't mean there's always a fire. Feelings are real, but not always true. Feelings are signals, not necessarily truth. I emphasize this because in today's culture, we're often encouraged that we are to follow our feelings or do what makes us feel good or do what feels right. It's often said that feelings are your truth. And that's just not correct. Feelings are signals, not necessarily truth. Feelings can be informed by past trauma and not present reality. It's important that we understand that there is a healing process or a personal healing process around trauma. When Deborah was having panic attacks and anxiety years after her miscarriage, she realized something. There was no present danger, but she saw that there was still trauma from her past that needed healing. Feelings can't always be trusted. As I alluded to in the previous section, the cultural message is to follow your feelings as truth. The reality with feelings is that they may be real, but not filled with truth. If we follow our feelings and they are wrong, we could lead ourselves down the wrong path. Let's look at the biblical view. In the Bible, it shows and often portrays feelings are signals, and they're not elevated to truth. Deborah says that just because you feel something doesn't make it true. Let's look at the example of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is a quote from Deborah Fileta's book. She says, Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane moments before he was captured to be taken to the cross. The Bible says he was in such agony that he began to sweat droplets of blood. Medical experts have identified this condition as hematidrosis, an extremely rare physical reaction that's likely related to a fight or flight response. End quote. She goes on, his body was under such emotional distress that it signaled his sympathetic system to respond. The alarms were going off, telling him to get out of there, to run in the other direction. But Jesus knew this. Though his feelings couldn't always be trusted, his God could always be trusted. Questioning emotions. We need to remember that we shouldn't just simply react to intense emotions. We need to learn to recognize emotions as signals. Let's go over a list of some feelings that may be some false alarms. These are from Deborah Fileta's book. I just want to give her credit for these. So, first one, just because you feel lonely doesn't mean you're really lonely. Just because you feel worthless doesn't mean you're lacking value. Just because you feel overwhelmed doesn't mean you're not capable. Again, just because you feel something doesn't make it true. Deborah says that false alarms signal the need for more inner healing. Let's review what we've learned. We need to remember to question our emotions rather than simply reacting to them. As intense feelings like loneliness, worthlessness, fear, etc., can be false alarms not rooted in present reality. When we feel such things, it can be a signal that there's a need for more inner healing from past trauma. Verse for reflection. Being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Luke 22:44.